Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the library. You guys are really fortunate because you're here as part of our Earl Haig lecture series. And here at Earl Haig, we're extremely lucky this morning because we have author Sahar Delajani, who is here to speak to us about her new book called Children of the Jacaranda Tree. And she's here all the way from Italy, I believe. Okay, so she's made quite a trek to be here with us. So we'd like you all to be on your best behavior, which I know you will be, and please give a warm welcome to Sahar Delajani.
Hello, my name is Sahar Delajani. I was born in Iran, but grew up in the States. I moved to the States, to California when I was 12. And I studied literature, and this is my first book. I now live in Italy because I'm married to an Italian, and I left to Italy in 2006, so I've been living there for 7 years now, and it's pretty cool. And this book, I started it 3 years ago. Do you hear me? Okay, yeah. It's basically about the revolution in Iran. There was a revolution in Iran in 1979 when the people wanted to overthrow the Shah, which was the king. Iran had a history of 2,500 years of monarchy. And in 1979, people finally decided they had enough and they wanted a republic. What happened was that after the revolution, people, because it was a people's revolution, everybody, so from all different political parties and thought, came together to make this revolution happen. But afterwards, where the sort of more religious-leaning party took over, which is what happened in Iran now, it is that we have an Islamic regime, Islamic Republic of Iran, to be correct. So many of the people who had actually participated in the revolution were then prosecuted by the new regime because they didn't want any sort of opposition. So my parents, that's where I come in, where my parents were active before the revolution. And they were active after the revolution as well, because what had happened wasn't what they wanted. They wanted a sort of a secular democratic country, and that's not what they had got, basically. So they continued their activism. In 1983, everybody was arrested. And in 1983, my mom was pregnant with me. And that's when she was arrested. So I was born in prison. And I lived in prison for 45 days as a newborn. But then she had to give me out, and my grandparents raised me while my parents were both in prison. And there was my brother and my cousin as well, who was born in prison as well, because my aunt, basically my entire family was politically active, so they just took the entire thing with them to prison. So basically, this is the background to my novel. And there's another thing, which is the main theme of the novel. So in 1983, all the arrests take place, but in 1988, which is also the last year of war between Iran and Iraq, which had been going on for 8 years, in 1988, from 3,000 to 12,000 political activists were executed and buried in mass graves. We still don't know how many people were executed because it was just done like that. There hasn't been enough information out yet. And my uncle was one of those executed. So the main theme of this novel is that. So there are 7 narratives, and in the beginning they look like separate short stories. But as you read on, you'll see that they sort of interconnect, and you see characters seeing each other. And this is the main theme. And the 7 narratives sort of revolve around this theme. So it's about, the first part of the novel, it's about the children, my generation, who was born in prison, and their parents and what happened. So prison stories, the series of children who are being raised by their grandparents, and so on. And then the second part is about all these children having grown up, and it's in 2008 to 2011, and now how they look back at what happened, how they see their country now, because my generation has not seen anything else other than the Islamic regime. And how we want to make a difference, how in a way, like my generation has this responsibility of sort of finishing what was almost left undone by my parents or our parents in a way. And also because in 2009, there were renewed protests in Iran, which is something, what came to be known as the Green Movement. There were so many people out in the street, thousands and thousands of people out in the street. And then again, mass arrests and so on. So it was like history repeating itself. I guess while I was writing this novel, just on YouTube, on Facebook, there were just all these videos of protest, and as if everything was just happening again, you know. I had a live version of everything in front of my eyes. And that was a really, really important coincidence for me, because I thought it's very significant that I'm writing about something that happened 30 years ago, and here it is happening again, and this time it's my generation. So this is basically the background to my novel. The stories of prison are very much based on my parents' experience, so I had to sort of sit my parents down, my mom down, and tell her, okay, so how was I born? Give me details. And there were some, you know, as you can imagine, it's not hard to be pregnant and in prison, you know, and having to go into labor, you know, on a van, taking you from one, you know, prison cell to another. So it was very, very emotionally difficult to write as well, because I thought, oh my God, I made my mom suffer. You know, she was going through so much pain. But at the same time, I thought it was a very, very important story to tell. It had never been told before about that particular part of the population and what they went through. And I believe that for a country to be able to really make changes, true changes, they need to be aware of their history, of what has happened, of all the violence that has taken place, why it has taken place, who was involved. It has to be clear, otherwise we can never move forward. And that's why I thought I should write story, I should tell the stories of what happened to my family. And I'm very happy to say, you know, the book hasn't come out, it's going to come out in June, so I bet that you guys all are going to go out there and buy it and read it. Or maybe your library is going to have it, I don't know. And and it's very important for me that everyone's going to read this, you know, something that was such a secret and nobody knew. I mean, just from mass graves to like world knowledge, it's the biggest satisfaction for me and for my family, who are very happy that their stories has finally come out. And yes, that's it. That's the story of the novel, of Children of the Jacaranda Tree. Are there any questions? It was all clear? Yeah? Have any questions? How many Iranians do we have here? Okay, wow, good. Nice. Did you guys know about this? Yeah? What did you know? What did you know about? Did you know about the story of the revolution? What had happened? A little bit? Yeah?
My father also went to prison, so I kind of have like the knowledge about the story. So, yeah.
Okay, all right, that's very good. So I'm sure you can enjoy it. Has he told you any stories about prison?
Well, he tells me the less detailed, like descriptive and graphic stuff. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, very nice. Yeah? Yes, because I think there are no regimes that could last forever. I don't know how long it could be. Next year it could be in 10 years. This, you can never tell, but it's just an unnatural thing. Dictatorships are unnatural. They cannot last. And as I don't know if you guys have been like following the news in all these like Arab countries, what they call the Arab Spring in Syria, Tunisia, Egypt, and so on. So there's something happening out there because people cannot live in that situation. I mean, young people in Iran are so cultivated, so knowledgeable. They just know everything. They know from the the new episodes of How I Met Your Mother to like Django, and so like it's like they're living these parallel lives, this life of sort of closed environment that they can't talk to anyone, they can't express their opinions, and this other world behind closed doors at home where there's internet and there's Facebook and there's Twitter and they have this world with them, So it creates sort of a schizophrenic identity, I think, but which is what is so interesting, There's that resistance, and it's been going on for so long. So at a certain point, something is just going to explode. When? We don't know, but it will. Yeah?
When did you first get into writing?
I always wanted to write. So when I was at school, in high school, I wrote actually a lot of poetry. And that continued on to university. But at a certain point, I realized that I wanted to write stories, not so much poems anymore. But at the same time, I didn't believe in writing courses and writing schools. I thought that if all these big, huge writers we've had from past centuries, there were no writing courses around at the time, So I thought there should be a way of me learning how to write without actually going to a writing course. And that made me write 3 novels before this one, which was sort of a homework. I mean, they were no good. I got piles of rejection letters. But at the same time, it was good for me to learn. I was just learning by reading, above all reading, constantly reading, and writing. 1 novel, and the second one, and then the third one, and this is actually the 4th one, which I have written, the first to be published, so this would be my officially debut novel. But it was a long process, and but it was something I always wanted to do. I just didn't know how exactly. But it's something that comes as you work. The most important thing is just to write as much as you can and read as much as you can. Yeah?
So you said you've already previously written 3 novels, which unfortunately failed. What exactly was the motivation that you had to continue?
That's a good question. Because I knew I wanted to become a writer, and there was nothing that was going to stop me. So if it wasn't the first novel, it was going to be the second, not the second, the third, not the third, the fourth. So I mean, the important thing is just to continue. I knew if I wasn't going to become a writer, I was going to be a very unhappy person. So the future, just imagining my future doing anything else was unimaginable. So I just continued. And I knew that if you work hard enough, you're going to be rewarded no matter what. I just knew it. It was just this feeling in me. And so, yeah, that was the only thing. I couldn't do anything else, basically. Yeah.
How did you manage to do so much writing as well as keeping yourself having a living in the meantime before you wrote your novel?
Yeah, I had to discipline myself, actually, because while I was writing all these other novels, I was also working as like an English teacher, doing at university or private school and so on in Italy. And I just made myself wake up every day at 8 o'clock. It's still something very difficult for me to do. Don't ask me how I got here this morning because I don't know. But it was that, just to say, okay, every day, even if I didn't write so much, every day I had to be sitting in front of the computer and trying from 8 to 12 at least, okay? And then you find the time. When you really think you have to sort of pretend that it's your real job, even though you're not being paid for it, you have no idea what's going to happen in the future, but just pretend it's a job and you have to do these office hours and you have to go. And that's what I pretended for like 6 years, you know? Yeah.
What made you wanted to write a book about the revolution? Like, was there any significant event that made you
basically what happened was that these stories were always stories that I always heard. Like my parents, they always talked about them with their friends because most of my parents' friends are prison friends, what they call prison friends. And so it was so much part of my life that I wasn't even aware of them. You know, something that you've always seen that you don't even see anymore. So the question, I mean, I thought about it later that it took me so long to actually write it. I wrote about so many other things, just things that sounded interesting, you know, but they weren't my story. So I think the big discovery came when I realized that there were all these amazing stories my family had that hadn't been told. And actually it was one particular day because there's a chapter in the novel where a father who is in prison makes a bracelet made of date stones for his daughter. And that's a bracelet that my dad had actually made in prison. And I had always seen this bracelet. I knew more or less the story. But then one day, I don't know how it came out, and then I saw it again. I'm like, wait a minute, like, what is the story behind this bracelet again? And then he told it to me, and I thought, wow, that's a good story. I should write that story. And then that's how I wrote it. And then my birth story, the same thing. I had always heard it. My mom had always told me about it, but I had never really thought about it. So after that's another thing, because after the third novel, I thought, okay, I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I should just write short stories, try to get short stories published, and then see how it goes. And then I got that first short story of Bracelet of Date Stones published, and I thought, oh wow. Maybe because there was that emotional truth to that story. I knew exactly what I was talking about. You know, it wasn't like the other things I just tried to imagine. And from that, I told my mom, okay, so how was I born again? And the story just blew me away. And that's the second story. And just like that, until the fifth story, then I realized that I always went back to the same theme, the theme of prison, the theme of the executions, and so on. And I thought, okay, I can do something with it, and I can turn this into a novel. So it was a process. It wasn't like I woke up one day and I thought, but just little by little, I realized these were the stories that I had to tell. And the amazing part was that as soon as that happened, I started getting published. So the most difficult thing was to find the subject that felt the most powerful and the truest in a way for me. And then from there, just a novel, little by little. Yes?
How do your family members feel about having their personal stories told to the entire world?
Yeah. It was a difficult thing in the beginning, especially for my mom, because she was really traumatized by what happened to her. And it took a long time to actually get her to sit down. But I think it had sort of a therapeutical effect on her, because then after that, she was like, just remember, she just came to the room one day and she was like, I have so many more stories to tell. I'm like, okay, calm down. Just go one by one. So it was like sort of this thing that she had always kept inside, and all of a sudden, they were just pouring out, you know? And I think for them, it's very significant, the fact that from not even being able to hold a funeral for my uncle, because that was just forbidden, to like people in like, I don't know, Bosnia even being able to read it now, for them was just the most amazing thing that could happen. And for me is the biggest satisfaction, you know, to have their stories out. They're still, I think, a little bit, they don't even know exactly how they feel. They're very happy for me and they're very excited. But I think once the book comes out, then they will really realize the extent of it. Maybe they would just really be angry. I don't know. But at this point, they're happy, you know, because they believed in what they did. When they participated in the revolution, they wanted that to happen. And it was just really unfair for them to go to prison for what they made happen. Those people were up there in the government because of people like my parents. And so I think it's kind of not a revenge, but just sort of the other side told. Yes?
I missed the very first part of your little talk, but is your family still in Iran?
Well, no, most of my family is in the States. Yeah.
Because I was just gonna say, that if they still were, then I guess they'd be afraid, right?
Well, I have family in, I mean, like all my dad's side is in Iran, my grandma, my uncles, my cousins, and so on.
Is it dangerous for them?
But they have all served their prison sentence by now, So I think also for them, when I talked to my uncle, for example, in Iran, he was like, he wanted these stories to be told again. So I think at this point, like, nobody thinks about fear anymore, It's just like, it's enough. We had 30 years of fear. Let's just move on and tell the story and then see what happens from there. But they're very supportive. Yeah. Yes.
You said that anyone who's interested should write a lot, but then you also said read a lot. Can you
Yes.
expand on the importance of reading? Sorry, I'm an English teacher, so I'll let you
I personally cannot write absolutely not a word if I'm not reading. Because I don't know anything, like compared to so many amazing writers, starting from classics and Tolstoy and Dostoevsky to people, Hemingway, to amazing writers right now. I felt just this small, so I needed to learn from them, and there's nothing really, we know so little. If once our just eyes open and horizons open, that's the only way, is through reading, watching films, and that's when you actually understand what's going on in your brain. Because we don't know what's going on. I didn't know what I had. I didn't know anything, I needed to learn. I think we can never stop learning, ever. There's just so much out there, And I knew I had to build myself up. If I wanted to become a writer, I had to build myself as a writer. And the only way to do that was to read other writers, It was just almost like automatic for me, So I recommend that just really so much. Yes.
Are you writing in Farsi, English, Italian, or all three?
No, in English. Because, I can read and write in Farsi. I have no problem writing in Farsi, but because I grew up in the States, all my education was in English, so it's the language I find easiest to express myself. And but the book will be translated into Farsi by my dad. We will work on it together. But now English has become the language I express myself in, writing at least. Then I try to express myself in other languages as well. But writing, English has become the official one. Yeah. Yeah.
Did you find it difficult in the editing process if somebody wanted to change the intended meaning of one of your family stories? Was it difficult for you?
Mm-hmm. I had to think hard and long about all the changes that they were proposing, but at the same time, the editors were just so amazing because it was suggestions. So we think maybe this, you should, change something. If I thought it was right, I would do it, and if not, I wouldn't. But I've always been very open to suggestions because I think there's just so much I can learn. I don't think, I'm now, the writing is perfect, and I think there's so much to learn. So for me, it's actually the most amazing and fun and interesting part is that sort of dialogue with editors, their suggestions, to think them through. And then most of the time, when you do the suggestions, it actually gets much better because there are things that you don't think about anymore because you've written it, you don't see it. But at the same time, when I felt like the change was too much into the story, in the structure of the story, then I would just say no, and they would say, fine. Yeah. Yes.
I kind of have a feeling this is answers to this question already, but are you planning to continue writing?
Yes.
Hopefully maybe a fifth novel or sixth.
I know. Yes, definitely. There's so many stories still to tell. I'm thinking right now. I haven't started writing the second or the fifth, as you say, which is the correct one. But definitely, yes, one is not enough. You need to continue. But at the same time, I don't want to rush into it, you know? I think it's very important to take my time. And the most important thing is to just not think of myself, okay, now I'm published. Now they'll just publish whatever I write. It's very important to just pretend like I haven't published. I'm still this starving, struggling writer. And I think that's important because it makes you work harder on what you're doing. So yes, definitely, next novel is on my list of things to do. Yeah.
When was the last time you went to Europe?
I went to Iran 2 years ago for a cousin's wedding. It's actually my cousin who also lives, who was also born in prison like me and lives in the States, but he met this girl in Iran, fell in love. And then we all went to the party, which was so much fun. And really, going to Iran is one of the funnest things I've ever done. Really, I've been to many places, but there's something about Iran because the population is so young. 2/3 of the population was born in the 80s. For you, that sounds old, but that's my age. So in their 20s and 30s. So it's just this energy, constant, and just on the streets, you know, and just people are talking, and the parties are amazing. You wouldn't believe it. So, really, it's crazy. So I recommend to everyone just checking Iran out, checking Tehran out, especially if you have family, especially if you're Iranian, because it's just another world and it opens your eyes to so many things that you either took for granted or just didn't even see, you know? Yeah. Okay. Oh, wait. Yes.
Knowing what your parents have gone through, how do you think it's changed your just perspective of life and how you view the world?
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, when I was writing the novel, before writing the novel, I hadn't even thought about how old my parents were when all of this was happening. And the fact that they were my age was pretty mind-blowing. And I think that has, there is sort of a solidarity in my family that I don't see in other families because of what we have gone through. So I think it just made me feel that their experience has just shaped my entire life. You know, whatever we do, we always go back to the fact that they weren't there when we were born, they weren't there when we were growing up, and so on. But at the same time, that just makes us be so much closer to each other. You know, and I think that what has shaped my life just up until now, that sort of intimacy and solidarity and love, which I think is the most important thing. Yes?
How long did your parents spend in prison?
My mom was in prison for about 1.5 years, and my dad like 2.5 years, 3 years. Yeah. Yes?
Do you know what the conditions were in prison? Like, were they like the prisons we have here, or were they worse or better?
Yeah, I don't know how the prisons are here, actually. But it was like this. I mean, there were many people in one small room, like 20, 30 people in one small room. So that was very, very hard. Like, they had to just like sleep like one next to the other. But at the same time, like, there was like food, and they were just had a lot of like free time, go out into the courtyard and so on. So it was a mixture, you know. And they were all political prisoners, so that was good. They didn't mix them up with, you know, like criminals, I don't know, which makes a big difference, you know. So anyway, it was hard. I'm sure they would have, you know, been much better off just outside. But it was a mixture of both. It was both difficult and at the same time not tragic or like violent or anything like that. but it was just like them like having lost 2 years of their life, basically. Yeah?
Clearly, the Ayatollah and Ahmadinejad have a very tight reign on power in Iran at the moment, probably more so than, say, Assad in Syria and what's going on in Egypt. What do you see happening in the near future? You were saying at the beginning of your talk that young people are really, after having experienced the oppression for the last 30 years, and of course all the corruption under the Shah's regime, and of course they would remember that. What do you see happening in the next little while?
And this is just my personal opinion. I mean, things could be just completely opposite of what I think. But I think from my impression is that people don't want another revolution. And I think one reason the Green Movement didn't turn into something bigger was that we had a revolution just 30 years ago. You cannot have so many revolutions so often, So I think the idea is to reform, little by little. It's more difficult in a way, because it's slower and it's much more constructive, but constructive is not always easy, Sometimes it's just easy just to throw the chairs up, than to actually start and like putting them nicely next to each other, So I think the my generation believes in reform, slow reform, and I think that's what's going to happen. I don't know when. It has to do every election is going to be something new. And these elections are very important. We don't know what's going to happen. But I think that's it. So I don't think in the next few years anything's going to change. But at the same time, I see from like just reading the news and stuff that the regime is sort of fractured from inside. I mean, Ahmadinejad and Khamenei used to be allies, and now they're just like fighting all the time, And that's also what happens in dictatorships. At a certain point, they just sort of implode. So we're just waiting for them to just like beat each other up, and we take over. Yeah. Yes. I mean, when I was without my parents, I don't remember it much. I was very young, but packing and moving to the States was very difficult. Also because I didn't know English. I mean, my mom had put me in all the English courses possible. And the shocking thing was I went to the States to Berkeley. We lived close to Berkeley, and I didn't understand a word. And that was shocking. I thought, hey, what? I studied for so long. And but then once you learn, and then you try to, it's a cultural shock in the beginning. But people are so nice, and I started 7th grade, so everybody just was talking to me at the same time. So it took me like 2 weeks to learn English because everybody was talking. And so it was fun at the same time, but I had to try to adapt. For example, I had to go to school in Iran that there were just girls school. And all of a sudden, I went to school and there were all these boys around. That was a very positive thing, it was much more fun. So there were good points and bad points, but overall it was difficult but fun and stimulating. I met so many cool people, so it was nice. Any more questions? Yes. Yes, I think it's going to be always about the same theme, but I think now it's, because this novel was about the life during prison, and I think now I'd like to write about the new beginning, when they came out of prison. What happened? How did they start their whole life again? Because you have this pause of 2-3 years where the world is changing outside and you're inside and you have no idea what has happened, and you come out, you have these children who don't even recognize you, of course. So I think that's what's going to be about. Also because I like to write about things that I like to find out about. I like it to be also a process of discovery for me. It's much more fun like that. And So that's like a half idea I have, and I'll see where it goes. Yeah. Yes?
Can you describe your writing process a little bit? Like, do you like just write, and then edit, or like how do you go about doing it?
I write the first draft very quickly. I usually write it in a few days. Then it takes 3 years to rewrite it, basically. Because my novel, I wrote it in 3 years, but I can tell you really, the first draft, I wrote it in the first few months. I think it's the process of the rewriting which is the most important thing, because you go back, you add details, you think about it, you think about all the different layers, all the different aspects, how you can really bring the characters to life, you know? And that's very important. And details for people who want to become writers, that's very important. There's nothing more important than details. Every little detail, how they touch their face, how they sneeze, anything, okay? So that's it. So first draft, very quick, rewriting, years. But I like rewriting. It's very interesting for me. It's easier than more difficult than writing the first draft, but at the same time more rewarding.
And did you edit yourself or work with somebody to edit?
I edited so many times with many different people. I edited myself first, then I submitted it to an agent. The agent accepted it, but wanted me to rewrite some things, some scenes that weren't, well written, well developed. So I worked with another editor. Then we submitted the book. The publisher bought the book, but then they wanted some more editing to be done. So I had to work with the English and the American editors at the same time. So yeah, I worked with many people, and that was very interesting. They had many different, just so much feedback to give, and so many different opinions and ideas, and that was very interesting. Any more questions?
Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you to Sahar for your talk today and your lecture. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you for talking to us about the writing process, about your book and your family's experience. And we will definitely have copies in our library when it gets published at the end of the school year, so come back and check it out. All of your teachers have received postcards with the cover of the Children of the Jacaranda Tree on the front and some information about the book, as well as Sahar on the back. And the last thing I'll mention is this is, I guess, number 7 of our author and our lecture series here at Earl Haig. And we actually have something called the Author's Chair. I don't know if anyone has seen it. It's just at the back of the library. And we will be getting Sahar to sign our chair. And it's something that has been signed by all of the authors and all of the intellectuals who have been coming to our library this year. So on your way out, take a look at the chair. And thank you again for coming and for being such a great audience.